abuse. So one gentleman that I worked with, we'll call him Craig. Craig was having issues in his marriage, as he described it. But the real issue was that he couldn't get good communication going with his wife. He would notice his wife seemed unhappy. She seemed bitter. When Craig would approach his wife would kind of go into a tirade of everything she hated about Craig. And sometimes it would be new stuff. Sometimes it would be some of the oldies that she would pull up from years ago. And she would list several things about Craig that she didn't like. So typically, Craig would try to listen to this, try to apply what he could. He found himself defending himself sometimes because it seemed a little extreme, some of the things, kind of unfair. And this would sort of be the routine over time. Again, even though he would be working on whatever it was she said, he would notice she was unhappy. He would check in with his wife. His wife would kind of list off things. At a time, he noticed his wife would raise her voice a lot. So he made a point to make sure he didn't raise his voice back and pointed out to her that she was raising her voice at him. Over time, she recognized this in herself and was able to not raise her voice. Now, this took many years, but it would still be a constant routine of her noticing something about him, being angry about it, Craig approaching, and then his wife telling him all the things that she had a problem with, but she would just not yell when she did it. And this would leave Craig feeling sad. Eventually, Craig started to develop depression because he couldn't ever live up to the list or improve all of the things that she would talk about. And some of the things seemed exaggerated or just plain false that she would say. And so he would end up either defending himself, and that puts him into a fight. And that wasn't what Craig wanted. He just wanted everyone to be happy. Now, hold that in your mind for a second. And in comes Kara, who's another person that I work with. And she talks about her experience with her mom when her mother would become angry. Her mother would say very harsh things to her because she was angry. So her mother would say things like, this is why you don't have any friends. Nobody's going to like you. She would say things to imply that Kara was not lovable. Uh, Kara started to internalize this um, feedback, if you will, she was getting from her mom and started to believe this about herself that, well, maybe perhaps she's just not lovable. And it started to affect Kara's happiness and her sense of stability, confidence, inner security, and self worth. Now, what both Kara and Craig have in common is that both of them, when I said, you know, you're being abused, when I said that to them, they both said, really? And there it goes with some forms of abuse, particularly verbal abuse and mental abuse, are not as easily perceptible as physical abuse or maybe sexual abuse. So it's very obvious to us if someone is physically abusing us. But many survivors have remarked that the scars of emotional abuse and verbal abuse are so terrible, it makes them wish they had been physically abused instead. So emotional, mental, uh, verbal, physical abuse, whatever it is, we need to be able to identify when something actually crosses the line to be abuse. And so, if you have your copy of the book Mind by Roman Zanoni, you can get a copy of this on Amazon if you don't have your copy already. We're going to be looking at chapter 20 in the book, and you can follow along here. Because under relationship skills, chapter 20, relationship skills, it details for us exactly what abuse is so that we're not going to be fooled and we're able to actually identify abuse. Okay. And here's what it says. It says, uh, If anyone offers more than a few points of constructive criticism, you can inform them that they are being verbally abusive. If it persists, you should remove yourself and not engage with that person. Did you catch that? If anyone offers more than a few points of constructive criticism, what happens when someone is criticizing you, they don't have to yell for it to be verbal abuse. They don't even have to seem angry. You see, if I sit here and I say, you know what, you're really gaining a lot of weight in just this tone, you're really gaining a lot of weight. And you know, a lot of people really don't like you. And you know, you did fail on your test the other day. And you know, you're not really helping out a lot with the chores around the house. And you know what, I'm really sick of hearing you complain about the so-and-so. And you know, I really don't like your haircut. And you know, another thing, I think that it's really ridiculous that you keep wanting me to participate with you in the so-and-so. And you know, another thing about you that's really bad, and they just go down a list, no matter how calmly they go down that list, that is verbal abuse. When someone's telling you negative things against the self, the sense of self that you have is as important as your physical body. So it's just like if someone hits you or they strike you really hard, obviously we identify that as physical abuse, right? But someone can just do something destructive to our body that isn't as overtly violent, right? What if someone were to slowly scrape away at our skin with a sharp object, just very calmly? Is it still physical abuse? Of course, of course. What if someone were to slowly start squeezing our neck so that we eventually couldn't breathe? Would that be physical abuse? Of course. Anything that is a violation of the body is a physical abuse. Anything that is a violation of yourself, your soul, your ego, is a form of verbal abuse when they're using words to do it. So again, they're giving you words. They don't have to be angry about it. They're telling you negative things about yourself. It's a form of verbal abuse. Some narcissists are very slick about the way that they verbally abuse you. They just like to get in a lot of little side comments. And so you literally can just be eating ice cream together. And they could be like, oh, I'm surprised you got another scoop. Just the little side comments. What do you mean by that, you say? Oh, I'm just surprised because never mind, never mind. Just the little side comments that they say. Or you go to them for support for something that you've been through that's distressing. Oh, they terminated me at work, or they gave me the bad assignments, and then your abuser says things like, "I'm not surprised," and you're like, "What? What does that mean?" I mean, I'm not surprised that people are treating you badly, and it's like, you're not surprised that you go to them for the support, and they're telling you they're not surprised that other people treat you badly. In other words, they want you to believe that you are to blame for the way that you are treated. And that is a form of verbal and mental abuse. They want you to believe that you are to blame for any bad things that happen to you, even on a spiritual level. You'll be like, oh, I had a financial reversal or my car didn't work. And they'll be like, God's probably punishing you for the such and such. And you're like, hmm? And if you're unwitting, you might actually internalize that and it would damage your sense of self. So we want you to be able to identify the abuse. And that's what chapter 20 is helping you to do in the book here. If you're just joining us, Mind, we're in chapter 20, so you can follow along with us. It says this: emotional abuse, because what's the difference, right? With emotional, verbal, mental abuse, you ever wonder that? What's the difference? Notice that it says Emotional abuse is when someone tries to cause you painful feelings, disregard your feelings, or invalidate your feelings. This can be in what they say or do. Again, emotional abuse is when someone tries to cause you painful feelings, or they disregard your feelings, or they invalidate your feelings in what they say or do. Emotional neglect, on the other hand, is when someone tries to cause you painful feelings, disregard your feelings, or invalidate your feelings by what they avoid doing. And yes, I do consider neglect as a form of abuse. But to differentiate, the neglect is them avoiding doing something that causes you to have hurt feelings. And the abuse is when they do something that causes you to have hurt feelings, i.e., a mother who doesn't hug or comfort her child, she's neglecting the child. And that's emotional neglect. She doesn't hug the child. She doesn't comfort the child. She didn't do anything to the child. She doesn't hit the child. She doesn't even yell harsh words at the child. She just doesn't hug the child. That is emotional neglect. And it is equally as serious and leaves very, very deep scars, just like other forms of abuse. So we have to be able to identify that. Was I emotionally neglected in my relationship? Yes. In the context of a relationship, you are being neglected when someone fails to do something that they, by the contract of the relationship, are supposed to be providing for you. Because in marriages and in parent-child relationships, or with your parents too, to provide for you your emotional needs. And this is why it's hard to perceive, because normally if someone didn't give something, do something for you, like hug you, that's not neglect, right? But when your mom doesn't hug you and you're a child, that is neglect. When your wife doesn't hug you and you're her husband, that is neglect. When a husband doesn't hug a wife, that is neglect. When a husband doesn't compliment a wife, that is neglect. It's abusive. Is that making sense? The reason why it's imperceptible is because I don't expect everyone to give me compliments. So if my wife just doesn't give me compliments for a while, I don't even notice it until a really long time has even passed before I realize this, that I haven't gotten any compliments, right? And so my emotional needs are being neglected, but I don't even really realize it. And it's hard to tell anyone what the problem is, because it's not that they're doing something, it's that they're not doing something. So a good example of this is, imagine you're walking down the street. Just imagine yourself walking down the street, and a woman's walking past you. And you see her again later, she walks past you. Now, being that you don't know this woman, have you been neglected by the woman? Well, no, if you don't know the woman, she walks past you, that's not a form of neglect, right? But imagine now you go into a restaurant, and the woman, the same woman, works at that restaurant as a waitress. She is the only waitress on duty at the time. And you sit down, and after a long time has passed, she doesn't bring you any food. She doesn't bring you any water. She doesn't ask you what you want, and she doesn't even acknowledge your presence. Now, in this scenario, are you being neglected when she just walks by you? Yeah, right. Now, if a waitress walks by you in the context of the restaurant, it's neglect. In the context of the street, it's not neglect. So, what's the difference? It's all the context of what the relationship contract is. So, you understand, in a marriage, not doing simple things like providing for the intimate needs of your spouse, providing for the affection needs of your spouse, providing for the emotional needs of the spouse, including building them up, complimenting them, listening to them, giving them time, sharing your resources with the spouse, be that time, energy, personal space, your beauty, your body, your talents, or your money. If you're not sharing these things with your mate, you are neglecting them. That's neglect. It's a form of emotional neglect. And guess what? Nobody understands it. And so you're trying to tell people, hey, my husband never calls me beautiful, and people go, "Oh, honey, that's just men." And you're like, "Oh, okay." You go, "Oh, my wife, she always seems mad." It's like, ha, "Welcome to the club, buddy." Mm, no, this is serious stuff. This is serious stuff. My spouse won't make love to me. Serious stuff. Could be a form of neglect. No kisses in the context of a marriage. Serious stuff. And then we talk about parenting on the levels of sin. To not love a child. Many children who have parents who don't love them because they emotionally neglect the child. Uh, these children grow up to think that there's something wrong with them. So they interpret, oh, my parents ignored me. They didn't like me. They didn't love me. They didn't care about my feelings. So my feelings don't matter. I don't matter. I'm not likable. I'm not lovable. And they go out into the world with that script. How do you think that's going to work for them? Do you think that's going to work out? Going into the world, I'm not likable. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. No, it doesn't work well for them. It gets them into another abusive relationship after another abusive relationship, or they just flee from all relationships altogether and they don't feel like they're getting their needs met one way or another. In the relationship, they don't know how to get their needs met. Staying away from relationships isn't getting their needs met, all because parents aren't loving the children. What a sin. The thing is, if we just back the truck up a little bit, how do you not love a child? A child is inherently lovable, like every child. There's no such as an unlovable child. No, children are inherently lovable. To not even give them the decency of just doing loving actions towards them, it's inexcusable, and it's absolutely a form of abuse. So neglect is, as I consider it, a form of abuse. But that's the difference with neglect and abuse, what they do versus what they do not do. So you want to be able to identify these different forms, right? So we're going to get into two forms. It says below are forms of emotional abuse split into two categories. So you got emotional abuse at the top, and then the two categories are verbal abuse and mental abuse. So now you can realize, okay, when you have emotional abuse, you can break that down into two types of emotional abuse. There's verbal abuse and mental abuse. And now we get to understand what verbal abuse and mental abuse actually are. If you don't know, this amazing book that I'm reading from is Mind by Roman Zanoni. If you haven't gotten the message yet, you should have been got this book. Okay. So save up your money and go and buy this. Roman Zanoni on Amazon. Here we go. Verbal abuse is when someone uses words toward a person in a way that's detrimental. Verbal abuse is anytime they use, again, they don't have to be yelling. It's already verbal abuse if they're using their words in a way that's detrimental to you. Making sense? They're tearing you down with their words. They're using their words in a way that's detrimental to you. Making sense? This can include critical remarks, belittling jokes or comments, humiliation/ridicule, manipulation, smearing, threats and coercion, name calling. Those are forms of verbal abuse. Okay. Any of this sound familiar? I know it does. You know why? Because those who have complex trauma have been abused in like 90+% of the cases. Complex trauma is synonymous with being an abuse survivor. PTSD without the C doesn't have to come from abuse. But the C, the complex, means that you have ongoing trauma. Ongoing trauma typically is because you are a prisoner of war. Like you're stuck in a circumstance, in a marriage, in a relationship, or as a child in a household where you're being continually tortured, mistreated, neglected, abused. So, yeah, this is all very familiar to you. You went through this stuff, right? You had verbal abuse. Critical remarks, right? We're not talking about constructive criticism. Here's an example of constructive criticism. Hey, I just wanted to talk to you. You know I love you so much, honey. Okay. There's just this one thing that's really bothering me, and I gotta let you know about it. You're leaving your and blah blah blah. They give the criticism and they let you know it's in love. They give you one thing to work on. One, maybe two, but they don't have the aim of tearing you down. They're not looking to hurt you or harm your feelings. And they don't just go on and on and on like there's no end to all the badness about you. You see the difference? That's constructive criticism. It's proper, it's appropriate, it's necessary that we offer a little criticism to our loved ones. Our children need constructive criticism from parents, and husbands need it from wives, and wives need it from husbands. We need to know why. Because when they speak up, number one, they're expressing their standards, their boundaries, their needs, their wants to us. And number two, it helps us to not be so darn annoying. And so we won't be so irritating if we take their advice. And so they're telling us, here's how you could be less irritating to me. Pick up your little floss sticks that you leave around. If you just pick these things up, please, I love you. But if you do this, I can love you more. It's like, okay, that's fine. That's not abuse, right? Right. But it's when they just keep going and going and going with different things. Belittling jokes or comments. Again, when the purpose of making these jokes is to show disregard for you or your feelings, to show you disrespect, to tear you down, that's a form of verbal abuse. Oh, here comes the moron. Here comes the moron. Here he comes. Every time you make a mistake, there's the moron. Everyone's laughing. Should have known the mess up would do it. You're just a mess up. The family mess up has done it again. Come on, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, that's abuse. That's abuse. It's meant to show disregard for you, to tear down your self-worth, to tear down your self-esteem, and to make you the punching bag of the group. That's not your job. That's not what you're here for, to be the punching bag of everyone else, to be the laughing stock. No, it's a form of abuse. Ridicule. They want to point out something that's off about you, that's bad about you, and embarrass you in front of everyone. So there you are, you're at the family function, and then your mom wants to bring up that time that you had an accident on yourself. And what's the point, mom? Why are you doing that? Well, she does it because she wants to show that disregard. She wants to put you in that humiliating position. In that case, then it's abuse. Now, don't get me wrong, most moms are a little bit embarrassing. And so it's not always abusive if your mom embarrasses you. But when they're showing that utter disregard, it's on a continual basis. This happens repetitively. This can be a form of verbal abuse. Manipulation can be a form of verbal abuse. Not all manipulation is bad, right? If you tell your child, hey, we'll go out and we're going to go to the park if you clean your room. Can you clean your room for me? Yeah, you're using a reward as kind of an incentive. There's some level of manipulation there, but it's not malevolent. So it's not bad. Not all manipulation is actually bad. But it becomes bad when we do it to the detriment of the other person or for solely our own personal benefit. When we use lies or threats as a part of the manipulation. So a person comes to you and says, oh, mom always wanted me to have those earrings, but it's no big deal. I mean, you can keep them. And you're like, oh, I mean, really? I like them, but I mean, I didn't know that she wanted you to have them. I never knew it was a big deal to you. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's just that mom always talked about me having them. Meanwhile, this person is making up the story, right? They're manipulating you into doing what they want you to do. So you're like, here, take the earrings that I inherited. Oh my God, thank you so much, right? The manipulation, It's a form of verbal abuse. Don't let yourself be manipulated by people. Threats and coercion. Threats and coercion. A lot of times, threats and coercion is the aspect that takes having a boundary or a standard into being actually just trying to control someone else. It's the use of threats and coercion. So there's a difference between saying, um, honey, I don't like it when you go to the bar and after work and talk to all those girls there. I don't like that. Okay, well, that's just you expressing a boundary, a standard, your wants and needs, right? Threats and coercion comes in, and if you go to the bar again, I'm gonna burn your clothing. Now we're controlling the behavior of the person with threats and coercion. This is more poignant when we see it happen. It's very common with men doing this to women with the threats and coercion. I'm going to remove the money from you if you don't do what I want. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to ridicule you. I'm going to expose you. They try to use things that are going to scare you. I'm going to kill your dog, right? I'm going to do something to your child. High level abuse. Threats and coercion is high level abuse. It's not acceptable. And then finally, we have name calling, right? So there's playful name calling. Oh, here comes Dodo Head, right? And then there's really harsh name calling, which can happen in a fight when people are yelling. You should have a standard in your relationship. You never call each other names. That should be a simple standard. You never, even no matter how mad you are, you could be holding it back like you never let it come out. You never call someone a name. Never call someone a name. Very good. So let's take a look at mental abuse. Let's take a look at mental abuse. Yes, I did skip smearing. Smearing, you're not gonna let me miss that one, right? Smearing is slander. That's what smearing is. So you go behind someone's back and you say something about them that's not true so that you can help to turn other people against them. You're using your words to speak negatively about a person. That's verbal abuse. But please don't be fooled. People can smear you to your face as well. So many narcissists will try to convince you that you are the problem, that you are sick, that there's something wrong with you, that you are bad, right? So they smear you directly to your face. So it's not just always behind your back. So please understand that. This next category is mental abuse. It says mental abuse is when someone interacts in a way that can be detrimental to a person's mental well being. It often involves trying to convince someone they're wrong or ill. Mental abuse is when they interact with you in any way that's detrimental to your mental, emotional well being. Examples: blaming, gaslighting, silent treatment, mean treatment, ignoring boundaries, withholding affection or attention, verbal abuse, ghosting, triangulation, controlling behaviors. It's mental abuse. Blaming is to mess with your mind, to make you think that you are responsible for everything bad that's happening. Me and your father wouldn't be getting divorced if it weren't for you. That's blaming. That's a form of mental abuse. You are messing with someone's head. Gaslighting is the foremost form of mental abuse. The whole point of gaslighting is to ultimately convince someone that they're ill or wrong. So you're going to create a false reality, and then you're going to make them think that is their fault, or that they're mentally ill. That's something wrong with them. So you take their keys and then you hide the keys somewhere, and then they're looking all over for the keys, and then you say, you must be losing it. That is gaslighting. That is gaslighting. If something's wrong with you, you need to take your medications, right? That's gaslighting, making them think they're losing their mind, they're mentally ill. It's high level, highest level form of abuse. Silent treatment. A lot of people have moms that gave them the silent treatment, or dads, wives that are giving them the silent treatment, or husbands. We all know what that is. It's not taking a moment to pause from the conversation for an hour or so. Silent treatment is where someone for a sustained long period of time refuses to respond to you or acknowledge you like you are a human being. That's abuse. That's mental abuse to make someone feel like they're not important or they don't exist. And for a mother to do it to a child, oh my God, horrible. And it actually happens. Mean treatment is like silent treatment, only you could be talking to the person, you're just always mean to them. You slap their sandwich on the table, you're just mean to them. You just treat them in a mean way. This is a nice, subtle form of treatment that a lot of abusive wives, narcissistic wives, like to use these on their husbands. The mean treatment. So they're just mean, but it's not like they're just mad for an hour, two, three, four. No, no, no. It's like it's sustained for days at a time, just mean treatment for weeks, for months, for years. Is treating them like they don't deserve to be treated humanely. Walking past, brushing past, not saying excuse me or sorry or please, not showing any politeness, just treating someone as like they're dirt. Mean treatment is a form of mental abuse. So please be on the watch for that. Ignoring your boundaries, mental abuse. You tell your mom, Mom, can you please knock? And they barge in the door. This is my house, but they ignore your boundaries completely. Mental abuse. Withholding attention or affection, real subtle one. Real subtle. It takes a long time to realize what's happening. They are being neglected. They withhold their affection. So you're in a marriage, and all of a sudden you don't get any kisses, you don't get any hugs, or you're born into a family, which is even worse, with parents that aren't giving you any kisses, any hugs. Hello, people. Humans have emotional needs in the context of these relationships. So if you're a parent or a spouse, give the love freely. It costs you nothing. It costs you nothing. Give it. And that validates that human being. Verbal abuse can be a form of mental abuse because you're using words to tear down the person's psyche. Ghosting in the context of a committed emotional relationship, and all of a sudden you stop speaking to a person, that can be a form of abuse. It's a form of neglect. Don't mistake it. No, we're not talking about if you ghost some guy that you'll only talk to for 2 days and he seems weird, or if someone has proven to be abusive or dangerous and you need to ghost them and block them. No, no, no. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who has not proved to be dangerous, who you are in a committed emotional relationship with. And then suddenly, instead of letting them know, hey, I'm gonna leave, you just disappear on them. I'm sorry. That is a form of emotional neglect. Finally, we have triangulation, which is where someone involved becomes a third party. So what the narcissist does in triangulation is they have an issue with you, but they go get Sandra, your brother, their mom, another human. They bring the other human in and they get the human on their side. So now, as you try to have this discussion with them, you got the other human jumping in. Hey, yeah, yeah, taking the side of the narcissist. What did you say? No, you're wrong. You're wrong. So now you got two people pointing the finger at you like this. And you're like, what's going on? That's triangulation. You're like in a triangle with three people. And finally, controlling behaviors. So hopefully going through these is helping you to become more aware, more sharp in your understanding of abuse. This chapter tells you what to do when you encounter an abusive person, how to handle being finding yourself in an abusive relationship. So go ahead and check out this book. It's available on Amazon if you don't have it all right now.